The day NeuroSphere Technologies collapsed began with a simple misunderstanding. Marcus Bennett, billionaire founder of the nation's leading artificial intelligence security firm, walked into their headquarters dressed in casual luxury, designer, jeans, a cashmere sweater, and without the entourage most expected from someone of his stature. Receptionist Jessica Parker took one look at his dark skin and immediately dismissed him. "Deliveries in the back," she smirked, barely glancing up from her phone. Andrew Phillips, Chief Strategy Officer, recognized Marcus instantly, but remained silent, allowing the humiliation to unfold. As security escorted Marcus from the building, his expression remained unreadable, betraying none of the calculated response already forming in his mind. By afternoon, NeuroSphere's stock would begin its freefall. By month's end, the company would cease to exist. Marcus Bennett didn't believe in revenge. He believed in consequences. Morning light filtered through the sleek glass facade of NeuroSphere Technologies, casting geometric patterns across the polished marble lobby. Marcus Bennett stood across the street, observing the 42-story building that housed what industry insiders considered the most promising competitor to his own company. The structure gleamed like a monument to technological innovation, its architecture reflecting the company's meteoric rise over the past 5 years. Marcus wasn't one for dramatic entrances. Despite being the founder and CEO of Bennett AI, a tech empire valued at $11 billion, specializing in neural security frameworks and autonomous protection systems, he preferred to conduct his preliminary assessments without fanfare. This wasn't vanity. It was strategy. "I still think you should let me come with you," Gabriel, his chief of security, had said that morning. "At least have a car waiting." Marcus had merely smiled. "The best way to understand a company's culture is to see how they treat people when they don't know who they're talking to." Now, adjusting his Audemars Piguet watch, a subtle display of wealth that only those who recognized craftsmanship would notice, Marcus crossed the street. His attire was intentionally understated. A charcoal cashmere sweater over a crisp white button-down, tailored jeans, and handcrafted Italian loafers that spoke of quiet affluence rather than ostentatious wealth. No flashy logos, no obvious status symbols. Just clean lines and perfect fit, the hallmarks of true luxury. A stream of employees flowed through the revolving doors, their movements hurried by the Monday morning rush. Marcus observed a pattern forming. A middle-aged white man in an expensive suit approached the entrance and heads turned. Security nodded deferentially, and the receptionist visibly straightened her posture. The man wasn't wearing a badge, clearly not an employee, yet he received immediate respect. Interesting, Marcus thought. He joined the flow of people entering the building. The immediate change in atmosphere was palpable. Where others had received welcoming nods, Marcus felt side glances. A security guard's gaze lingered a beat too long. A young executive clutched her purse tighter as he walked past. The lobby itself was a showcase of contemporary design, white marble, chrome accents, and abstract art pieces that probably cost more than most employees made in a year. A security desk flanked the left side while the reception area dominated the center of the space. Behind it sat Jessica Parker, NeuroSphere's front desk gatekeeper. With her perfectly styled blonde hair and practiced smile, she wielded surprising power for someone so junior in the corporate hierarchy. She determined who was worthy of attention and who wasn't. As Marcus approached, She was scrolling through her phone, ignoring a young intern who stood awkwardly at her desk. "Excuse me," the intern said timidly. "Could you tell me where the Fernandez presentation is being held?" Jessica rolled her eyes dramatically, not bothering to look up from her screen. "Check the directory," she said, waving vaguely toward an electronic board. "I'm not Google Maps." The intern scurried away, face flushed with embarrassment. Jessica smirked, returning to her social media feed. The small display of power seemed to energize her, and she straightened her designer blazer with a self-satisfied adjustment. Marcus approached the desk, noting everything. The nameplate reading, Jessica Parker, Guest Relations Coordinator. The framed Employee Recognition Award dated 3 months ago. The subtle but unmistakable designer bracelet on her wrist. The way her eyes flickered up to assess him, then, immediately, back down in dismissal. "Good morning," Marcus said, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who commanded boardrooms. "I have a meeting with Michael Chen at 9:30. Jessica didn't look up from her phone. Her lacquered nails continued to tap across the screen as she responded with practiced disinterest. "Name?" "Marcus Bennett." This time she did glance up, her gaze performing a quick assessment. Her expression shifted from professional disinterest to something more disdainful. "Yeah, sure you do," she said with a scoff. "Delivery entrance is around back, through the service alley." She returned to her phone conversation, clearly over in her mind. Marcus remained still, his expression unchanged despite the dismissal. He'd encountered this before, the assumption that he couldn't possibly be who he claimed to be. Not with his skin color. Not in this building. "I'm not delivering anything," he clarified, his tone remaining even. "If you check the executive calendar, you'll find I have a 9:30 meeting with Michael regarding a potential partnership between NeuroSphere and Bennett AI. Jessica sighed with exaggerated patience. She set her phone down and made a show of typing something into her computer, though Marcus noted her fingers weren't actually pressing the keys that would access the calendar system. "Nope," she said, popping the P with unprofessional flair. "Nothing under Bennett or Marcus. No meetings with Michael until 11 hours. She leaned forward, lowering her voice to a stage whisper. "Look, I don't know what you're trying to pull, but Mr. Chen doesn't take unscheduled meetings, especially not with people who—" She paused, eyes sliding over his attire before continuing. "Might be wasting his time. So maybe you should leave." The tightening around Marcus's eyes was the only indication that her words had registered. He reached into his pocket for his phone, intending to call Michael directly, when Jessica's hand shot out, grabbing his forearm with surprising force. "Sir," she said, voice suddenly louder, clearly intended to draw attention. "I've already told you there's no meeting. You need to leave." Her grip tightened on his arm as she stood, attempting to physically guide him toward the exit. The movement caught the attention of nearby employees. Conversations paused as heads turned toward the commotion. Marcus remained perfectly still, neither pulling away nor escalating the situation. His gaze dropped to where her hand clutched his sleeve, then lifted to meet her eyes directly. "Take your hand off me," he said quietly. The words carried no threat, but there was something in his tone, a depth of authority that made Jessica's fingers loosen reflexively. She recovered quickly, face flushing with embarrassment at being momentarily cowed. Dropping her hand, she raised her voice further. "Security! We have a situation!" Employees in the lobby, had stopped pretending not to watch. Some smirked. Others looked uncomfortable, but remained silent. A black woman on the mezzanine level above paused at the railing, her expression troubled as she observed the scene unfolding below. "Is there a problem?" A deep voice cut through the tension. Two security guards approached, both large men with stern expressions and hands resting near their tasers. "This gentleman," Jessica emphasized the word mockingly, "is refusing to leave after being informed. He has no appointment." The security guards flanked Marcus, their positioning strategic, one slightly behind, the other directly in front, creating a barrier between him and the reception desk. "Sir," the lead guard said firmly, "I need you to step outside." Marcus's expression remained impassive. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. I have a scheduled meeting with Michael Chen to discuss—" "Sir," the guard interrupted, hand now gripping Marcus's upper arm. "We can continue this conversation outside." The second guard moved closer, creating a wall of intimidation. "Step outside before we have to escort you out." Throughout the lobby, the audience had grown. Employees lingered by the elevators, coffee cups suspended midway to lips as they watched the drama unfold. Jessica stood behind her desk, arms crossed over her chest, a satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "These guys never know their place," she whispered to a nearby co-worker, just loud enough for Marcus to hear. The grip on Marcus's arm tightened painfully as the guard began steering him toward the exit. Marcus remained composed, though something dangerous flickered across his eyes, a momentary reveal of the ruthlessness that had built his empire. He didn't resist physically. There was no need. Time would deliver his response. The elevator doors opened, and a white man in his mid-40s stepped out, his tailored suit and commanding presence immediately identifying him as someone of importance. Conversations hushed further as he took in the scene, eyes narrowing slightly as they landed on Marcus. "Is there an issue here?" the man asked, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Jessica's demeanor shifted instantly, her posture straightening as she addressed him with forced brightness. "No problem at all, Mr. Phillips. Just someone trying to talk his way into a meeting that doesn't exist." Andrew Phillips, Chief Strategy Officer at NeuroSphere, studied Marcus with cool appraisal. There was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, brief, but unmistakable. He knew exactly who Marcus Bennett was. Yet instead of intervening, he simply nodded toward the security guards. "Well, I'm sure our team has it under control," he said dismissively. As he turned away, he added under his breath, "Security should handle these types right away." Jessica giggled, clearly pleased with the approval. "Another one trying to beg for a job or something," she said, loud enough for Marcus to hear. Andrew chuckled in response, a sound bereft of genuine humor. "Some people just don't know how things work in places like this." He cast one last look at Marcus, an assessing gaze that revealed he absolutely recognized him, before strolling toward another set of elevators, leaving the situation to unfold without his intervention. Marcus locked eyes with Andrew briefly. It was a silent exchange that lasted only seconds, but in it was a promise, cold, calculated, and absolute. Andrew was the first to look away, his stride faltering slightly before he disappeared into the executive elevator. The security guard's grip hadn't loosened. "Last chance to walk out on your own," he warned, tugging Marcus toward the revolving doors. Jessica took advantage of the moment to approach, leaning in close to whisper in Marcus's ear. "Maybe next time dress the part. This isn't a charity office. The key." Words hung in the air between them, sharp and deliberate. Marcus's expression remained unreadable, his focus seemingly elsewhere, perhaps already calculating the moves that would follow this moment. As security pushed him toward the exit, Marcus noticed the black woman still watching from the mezzanine above. Unlike the others, her expression held no amusement, only a tightly controlled anger. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides, her body tense with the effort of restraining herself from intervention. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, an understanding passed between them. She had seen everything, and she wanted to help, but they both knew what speaking up would cost her. The guards released Marcus at the revolving doors, giving him a final push that was more for show than necessity. He straightened his sweater, adjusted his sleeves with deliberate calm, and stepped outside into the morning air. From behind him, he could hear Jessica's voice carried through the closing door. God, some people just don't know their place. Marcus paused on the sidewalk, extracting his phone from his pocket. He glanced at the screen, then back at the building. Through the glass walls, he could see Jessica already returning to her desk, laughing with co-workers who had gathered to hear her retelling of the encounter. She picked up her phone, still smirking, and froze as it buzzed with a notification. He turned and walked away, each step measured and unhurried. Behind him, the first tremors of the earthquake he was about to unleash were already beginning. In his sleek black Tesla, Marcus Bennett sat quietly as his driver navigated through city traffic. He scrolled through detailed profiles of NeuroSphere's key executives on his tablet, information gathered months ago in preparation for the potential partnership. His finger paused over Andrew Phillips's file, lingering on notes about the man's resistance to the Bennett AI deal and his connections to competing firms. Marcus's phone pinged with a message from his assistant. Legal team assembled and waiting. For your instructions, he typed a brief response. Proceed as discussed. Full termination of all potential agreements with NeuroSphere. Activate contingency plan Delta. Leaning back against the leather seat, Marcus gazed out at the city skyline. His expression remained calm, but his eyes held the calculated focus of a chess master visualizing the endgame many moves ahead. Where to, sir? His driver asked. The office, Marcus replied. There's been a change of plans. As the car accelerated smoothly into traffic, Marcus allowed himself a small, tight smile. The pieces were in motion. By the end of the day, the tremors would become an earthquake. By the end of the week, NeuroSphere Technologies would understand exactly who they had disrespected. And by the end of the month, they would no longer exist. Back at NeuroSphere, Jessica's phone chimed with a company-wide email notification. With trembling fingers, she unlocked her screen to read the message. Urgent. All senior management report to conference room A immediately. Partnership emergency. Security footage attached. J.A. Jessica clicked on the attachment and watched in horror as high-definition video showed her entire interaction with Marcus Bennett from multiple angles, including her sneering comments, her physical grabbing of his arm, and the security guards. Rough handling. The footage had no audio, but her expression and body language told the entire damning story. As she stared at the screen, another email arrived in her inbox. This one was addressed specifically to her. Ms. Parker, your presence is required at an immediate disciplinary hearing. Please report to HR Conference Room C at 11 a.m. sharp. Human Resources Department, NeuroSphere Technologies. The timestamp on the email was 10:55 a.m. She had 5 minutes. As Jessica rose from her desk on unsteady legs, a final email notification appeared. To all NeuroSphere employees, due to unforeseen circumstances, today's company update will be delayed. Please continue normal operations until further notice. Michael Chen, CEO, NeuroSphere Technologies. But there was nothing normal about the panic spreading through the building. In the executive suite, Michael Chen slammed his fist onto the conference table. How could this happen? How could we let this happen? Andrew Phillips maintained his composure, though beads of sweat had formed along his hairline. Michael, let's not overreact. Bennett is a businessman. He'll get over a simple misunderstanding. Michael turned on him, eyes blazing. A simple misunderstanding? Our security guards physically manhandled a man worth billions. A man who controls the very technology we need to survive the quarter. He jabbed a finger at the frozen image on the conference room screen, showing Andrew clearly witnessing the incident. And you recognized him. Don't deny it. I can see it in your face on the goddamn security footage. You recognized Marcus Bennett, and you said nothing. Andrew's carefully constructed facade began to crack. I wasn't certain it was him. And if it was, why would he show up unannounced, dressed like that, without an entourage, or— Because that's who he is, Michael shouted. If you'd bothered to read any of the briefing materials, you'd know Bennett is famous for his unannounced visits. It's how he assesses company culture before finalizing deals. He collapsed into a chair, running shaking hands through his hair. This partnership was our lifeline, Andrew. Without Bennett's neural integration technology, we're dead in the water against Quantum Shield's new platform. As if summoned by the mention, Michael's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The caller ID displayed William Farrow, Quantum Shield CEO. Michael and Andrew exchanged a look of pure dread. It had already begun. On the mezzanine level, Zora Jackson quietly gathered her personal items from her desk, slipping them into her purse. Her resignation letter, drafted months ago during a particularly demoralizing performance review where her innovations had been credited to a white male colleague, sat ready to send in her email drafts. She took one last look at the NeuroSphere logo mounted on the wall, then clicked send on the resignation email. Her calendar notification chimed softly, reminding her of tomorrow's breakfast meeting with Marcus Bennett. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't be watching from the sidelines. 3 weeks had passed since the incident at NeuroSphere Technologies, but the aftershocks continued to reverberate through the tech industry. What had begun as a humiliating encounter in a corporate lobby had cascaded into the complete dismantling of a once formidable company. In NeuroSphere's half-empty headquarters, the remaining executive team huddled in what had become a daily ritual of damage control. The spacious boardroom, once a symbol of corporate success, now felt like a war bunker for the losing side. Our legal team has reviewed the contracts again, said James Wilson, NeuroSphere's increasingly haggard chief counsel. There's no way out. Every major client has invoked the ethics clause to terminate early. Michael Chen barely reacted to the news. The past 3 weeks had beaten him down, each day bringing fresh disasters until he had reached a state of numb resignation. What about the government contracts? Those have different termination requirements. James shook his head. They've been canceled too. Someone at the Defense Department received an anonymous tip about Andrew Phillips's communications. With Quantum Shield, they're citing security concerns. Anonymous tip, Michael repeated with a bitter laugh. Nothing about this has been anonymous. Every move has Marcus Bennett's fingerprints all over it. The CFO slid a tablet across the table. The latest financial projections. We have about 2 weeks of operating capital left, and that's only if we proceed with the next round of layoffs today. Michael scanned the numbers, though they merely confirmed what he already knew. NeuroSphere was finished. The bankruptcy proceedings were moving forward, but there would be nothing left to reorganize, just assets to liquidate and debts to settle. Has legal made any progress with Bennett's team? Any settlement discussions? He asked without much hope. James shook his head. They won't even take our calls. Their position is that there's nothing to discuss. The partnership was never finalized, so there's no breach of contract. Everything else, he gestured vaguely, everything else is just business. Just business. The phrase hung in the air, its implications clear. Marcus Bennett hadn't needed to declare a vendetta or issue threats. He had simply allowed market forces to do his work for him, strategically accelerating NeuroSphere's downfall through perfectly legal business maneuvers. Across town at the Bennett AI campus, the atmosphere could not have been more different. The sleek modern building hummed with productive energy as employees moved purposefully through open workspaces designed to foster collaboration and innovation. In a glass-walled conference room, Marcus Bennett hosted the final integration meeting between Bennett AI and Insight Dynamics teams. The merger had proceeded at unprecedented speed, with both companies' technologies already showing promising results in early integration testing. Your neural network security protocols mesh perfectly with our quantum encryption framework, Daniel. Yang, former CEO of Insight Dynamics and now Chief Innovation Officer at Bennett AI, was saying, the combined system is showing a 98% success rate against even the most sophisticated penetration testing. Marcus nodded, pleased but not surprised. The compatibility of their technologies had been a key factor in his decision to pivot from NeuroSphere to Insight Dynamics, a decision he'd been considering even before the lobby incident. Zora's team deserves much of the credit, Marcus replied, nodding toward Zora Jackson, who sat confidently at the table. Their improvements to the adaptive response algorithms have eliminated the false positive issues we were seeing in early AI trials. Zora accepted the acknowledgement with a professional smile. Her transition to Bennett AI had been remarkably smooth, her talents immediately recognized and rewarded. Where NeuroSphere had buried her innovations under layers of management and corporate politics, Marcus had given her direct access to resources and decision-making authority. As the meeting concluded, Marcus asked Zora to stay behind. Once they were alone, he handed her a tablet displaying architectural renderings. The Bennett Center for Innovation, Zora read, examining the detailed plans. This is the NeuroSphere building. It will be, Marcus confirmed. Our acquisition offer was accepted yesterday. Once the bankruptcy proceedings conclude, we'll take ownership and begin renovations. Zora studied the plans more carefully. This doesn't look like office space. It won't be, at least not entirely. The lower floors will house a technology education center focused on underserved communities. The upper levels will be incubator space for minority entrepreneurs developing innovations in cybersecurity and AI. You're turning NeuroSphere into an innovation hub for black tech founders, Zora said, understanding dawning in her eyes. Marcus's expression remained composed, but there was a quiet intensity in his voice. What happened at NeuroSphere was never just about one receptionist or one executive. It was about a culture that enables such behavior throughout the tech industry. The Bennett Center will be part of changing that culture. He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the city. I'd like you to oversee the education programs at the center. Your technical expertise combined with your passion for mentorship makes you the ideal candidate. Zora was momentarily speechless. The opportunity was beyond anything she had imagined, a chance to not just advance her own career but to help create pathways for others like her. I would be honored, she finally said, genuine emotion coloring her voice. Marcus nodded, satisfied. Good, we begin planning next week. In a modest apartment across town, Jessica Parker sat surrounded by moving boxes. Her once pristine space now a chaotic reflection of her unraveling life. Her phone, a new number after the harassment became unbearable, rang with her mother's ringtone. Yes, Mom, she answered tiredly. Jessica, did you see the news there?
Saying NeuroSphere is officially bankrupt. What does this mean for your lawsuit?
Jessica closed her eyes, fighting back the now familiar wave of despair. It doesn't change anything. Marcus Bennett's lawsuit against me is personal, not against the company. The personal lawsuit had become her waking nightmare. Her savings were depleted from legal retainers, her credit cards maxed out, and now her apartment lease was ending with no prospect of finding a new place. Not with her name and face still circulating online as the racist receptionist. Well, what does your lawyer say? That I should settle, Jessica replied dully. That fighting this will cost more than I could ever afford to pay. And I'd still, who's in the end? The reality of her situation had become impossible to ignore. Her former co-workers wouldn't speak to her. Job applications went unanswered. Even dating apps had banned her account after users reported her profile. The full weight of public condemnation had transformed her life into an unrecognizable nightmare. I have to go, Mom. The moving truck is coming soon. After ending the call, Jessica checked her email one last time, a self-destructive habit she couldn't seem to break. Among the hate mail and spam was a message from an unfamiliar address, with the subject line, Employment Opportunity. Desperate. For any glimmer of hope, she opened it. The message was brief. Ms. Parker, a position has become available at Green Valley Customer Service Center. Given your experience in client relations, you might be suitable for this role. Starting salary is $14.50 night shift only. Background check required. If interested, please reply with your availability for an interview. Jessica stared at the message, torn between relief and humiliation. From a prestigious reception position at a leading tech company to a night shift. Call center job at barely above minimum wage. The fall couldn't be more stark. With trembling fingers, she composed her reply, accepting the interview. 1 year later, the gleaming building that had once housed NeuroSphere Technologies was unrecognizable. The stark corporate facade had been transformed with warm wood accents and expansive glass. The lobby, now an inviting space filled with interactive technology displays and comfortable seating areas, bustled with activity. Where Jessica Parker had once sat guarding access to corporate power, young students from diverse backgrounds now gathered around workstations, absorbed in coding exercises and collaborative projects. The security guards who had manhandled Marcus had been replaced by community mentors who guided visitors with genuine warmth. The Bennett Center for Innovation had become exactly what Marcus had envisioned, a pipeline for underrepresented talent to enter the tech industry, supported by resources typically reserved for privileged insiders. On this particular morning, Marcus walked through the bustling space accompanied by Zora Jackson, whose leadership had been instrumental in the center's success. The first cohort of security specialists is graduating next week, Zora reported as they toured the facility. All 25 students have job offers, 8 of them from Bennett AI. Marcus nodded, watching a young black woman confidently leading a peer coding review. And the incubator companies. Tech Dreams and Neural Shield have secured second-round funding, and SafeSpace just signed their first major client. Zora couldn't keep the pride from her voice. They're redefining what's possible in the cybersecurity space, especially with your mentorship. As they reached the upper floors that housed the incubator spaces, Marcus paused to observe the transformation. The executive offices that had once been Andrew Phillips's domain now buzzed with the energy of startup founders building new technologies and futures. I received another email from Michael Chen yesterday, Marcus mentioned as they continued their tour. He's still looking for consulting work. Zora raised an eyebrow. What did you tell him? The same thing I've told him every month for the past year. His expertise doesn't align with our current initiatives. The subtle response was quintessential Marcus. No explicit rejection, no gloating, simply a business decision consistently applied. Michael Chen had lost everything in NeuroSphere's collapse, his reputation in tatters. He had retreated to Colorado, occasionally reaching out to former contacts for consulting opportunities that rarely materialized. And Jessica Parker? Zora asked, curious despite herself. Still at the call center in Green Valley. The lawsuit had been settled 6 months ago, a public apology and community service requirement rather than financial penalties. The settlement had been carefully calibrated not to destroy Jessica completely, but to ensure consequences proportional to her actions. The former receptionist now worked night shifts handling customer service calls, frequently facing the same dismissive treatment she had once dispensed so casually. You know, she applied for our administrative support program last month, Zora mentioned. Marcus showed no surprise. Yes, her application was considered like any other and found wanting. Again, no vindictiveness, just the natural consequences of actions and choices playing out over time. As they reached the center's community space, they found a group of teenage girls engaged in an animated discussion of neural network architecture. Seeing Marcus, they fell silent momentarily before one brave young woman approached. Mr. Bennett, can I ask you something? She said, her voice gaining confidence as she spoke. Everyone talks about how you built Bennett AI from nothing, but what was the hardest part? What was the biggest obstacle? Marcus considered the question, thoughtfully. The assembled students waited, notebooks and tablets ready to record whatever wisdom he might share. The biggest obstacle, he said finally, wasn't technological or financial. It was the persistent underestimation I faced. People who couldn't see past their preconceptions to recognize capability. He glanced around the room, making eye contact with each student. But underestimation can become your greatest advantage. When people don't see you coming, they don't prepare for your arrival. Remember that. The students nodded, absorbing his words with serious expressions. For them, Marcus Bennett represented something beyond wealth or technical brilliance. He symbolized the possibility of success in an industry that had historically excluded people who looked like them. Later that afternoon, Marcus stood on the rooftop terrace of the Bennett Center, gazing out at the city skyline. A year had passed since the confrontation in NeuroSphere's lobby, and the landscape, both literal and figurative, had changed dramatically. NeuroSphere Technologies no longer existed. Its assets had been sold off, its technologies absorbed by competitors, its name fading rapidly from industry memory. The executives who had enabled its toxic culture had scattered, some finding positions at lesser firms, others leaving the tech sector entirely. Andrew Phillips had faced the harshest fate. After pleading guilty to reduced charges of wire fraud and misappropriation of trade secrets, he had served 6 months in a minimum security facility. Upon release, he had found himself unhireable, his reputation permanently tarnished. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the city, Marcus's phone chimed with a message. It was from his chief of staff, confirming his attendance at the upcoming technology gala, where he would receive the Innovation Impact Award, the industry's highest honor for contributions to both technology and social good. The irony wasn't lost on him. A year ago, he had been physically removed from a tech company's lobby, dismissed and disrespected based solely on his appearance. Now he was being celebrated by that same industry, his influence extending far beyond his company's technological achievements. His phone chimed again with a text from Zora, who had stepped away to take a call. The Bennett Center is officially opening in Atlanta next month. Your legacy is just beginning. Marcus allowed himself a small smile as he gazed out at the city. The confrontation at NeuroSphere had never been about revenge. It had been about consequences, about establishing that respect wasn't optional in business or in life. What had emerged from that moment wasn't just the fall of one company, but the rise of something far more important, a new pathway for talent that had too long been sidelined. As he turned to leave the terrace, Marcus took one last look at the building that had once represented everything wrong with the tech industry's culture. Now transformed into the Bennett Center for Innovation, it stood as a physical reminder that power, when wielded with precision and purpose, could create lasting change. He had won not just by dismantling what was broken, but by building something better in its place. What would you do if your success became someone else's downfall? How far would you go to transform humiliation into lasting change? If Marcus Bennett's journey from disrespect to revolution moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of power, consequence, and transformation. New stories. Every day, where the underestimated always have the final word.